Hi guys, my name's Katherine. I'm one of the tutors here at Chegg. Usually I tutor science and some English, but today we are going to do a sociology lesson, which does have a science basis. And we are going to be talking about gender and sex. So a lot of people think that gender and sex are two words for the same thing. And in the way that we use them a lot in society, that can be true, but they actually mean two totally different things. So first, we're going to talk about sex. Sex is a biological thing. If you run enough tests on a newborn baby, you can know their sex. So when somebody is female, they have 46 chromosomes, and the two sex chromosomes are both what's called X chromosomes. And typically what happens is the chromosomes that you have determine the genitals that your body makes and the hormones that it produces too. So if you're female and you are 46XX, you will produce a lot of hormones like estrogen and estradiol and progesterone, and the genitals that you'll get will be things like the labia and the clitoris on the outside and the vagina and the fallopian tubes on the inside. If you're male, you also have 46 chromosomes, but you have one X and one Y sex chromosome. So the hormones that your body will make are things like testosterone and DHT, and the genitals that you get will be things like the penis, scrotum, and testes. But if you are paying attention, you heard that I said that's what usually happens. There's a whole other group of people who are called Intersex, and they are people usually where there's been a mismatch between their internal and external genitals. So there are four types of intersex people. The first are people who are 46XY. If you are paying attention over here, we said before that people who are 46XY are people who are female, right? But these people have a really enlarged clitoris and labia, and what ends up happening is they fuse together and they make something that looks more like a penis. If somebody is 46XY, they may have some sort of, they could have some sort of like incomplete external genitalia. It could be ambiguous, or it could look just completely female. And on the inside, their testes might be malformed, they might be perfectly typical, or they could be completely absent. But they're still XY. The third type of intersex people are what's called true gonadal intersex. These people could have XX in some parts of their body or X and XY in others. They could have all of one type throughout their body. But what characterizes them and what separates them from the other types of intersex people is that they have both testicle and I think ovarian tissue. Let me just double check. Yes, ovarian and testicular tissue. It's always good to make sure that you know that you're telling people the right thing, especially when you're a tutor. But anyways, so the fourth type of intersex is complex or undetermined intersex individuals. So these are people who don't have 46XX or 46XY. They could be 45X, so they're just missing an X chromosome. They could be XXX, they could be XXY. They cannot be just Y. Turns out you need at least one Y chromosome at least one X chromosome in order to survive. But other than that, they can be all sorts of different mixtures. And these people don't have a mismatch between their internal and external genitals, but they do have some sort of hormonal issues, and that can lead to issues later with sexual development. And so, okay, so this, thus far, that is sex. That's completely biological. If you run enough tests on a newborn baby, you can find out if they're XX or XY. You take off their diaper and you see what their genitals look like. You can figure out what somebody's sex is at birth. Gender, on the other hand, is way more complicated. So before we talk about what gender is, we're going to talk about what gender is not. So gender is not just having certain genitals. And we know that because if you were to get into a really bad accident tomorrow and you were to lose your genitals because it was so awful, you might be, very upset, and rightly so, but you would still be you. If you had a penis, and then you lost it, you wouldn't say, "Oh crap, now I'm a woman." Like, that was the only reason I was male. The only reason I was a man. You know that's not true. So gender can't just be genitals. We also know it's not just chromosomes because people don't really know what their chromosomes are. There's the Shania Twain song, and it doesn't go, "I feel like an XX individual." There's an inside feeling of like, oh no, it's more than just that, because there's no way to base your identity on a piece of information that you don't have. And because of these two things, it's also you're not able to tell what gender somebody is with a scientific test. So what gender is a performance in the context of the culture that you live in. And another way of saying that is that it's a social construct. And a lot of people get kind of like tripped up with that. They say that almost makes it sound like it's not real. Like a social construct is just something we made up. And it is true that we made it up in of that we created it as a society, but that doesn't make it not real. There are a lot of other social constructs. Let's see. I am American, and that comes with a whole slew of different ideas about work and about family and about what makes a life well lived. And I have my place within that American society. It's a place that I've determined for myself, and even if I don't have all of the words to express it, it's an intrinsic part of me now, what it means for me to be an American. We also know that gender is incredibly complicated in the same way that I don't have all of the words to talk about how I am American. I don't have all of the words to talk about how I am a woman. Side note, because I don't think I said this explicitly, man and woman, those are two examples of gender words rather than sex words. And you know what those things are, even if you don't know how to say it often. So one of my favorite sexologists, that means a doctor who studies sex, who talks about that is a woman named Dr. Lindsay Doe. And she describes the way we think about gender and the way we talk about gender as a lot like the way that map makers thought and talked about the world in the 1500s. We're super curious, we want to know the answers, but we just don't have enough tools right now to do all of the work. So she says, if you want to put it in her fantastic wording, I'll just put myself down there. Sometimes we have the words, but not a complete sense of a concept. For example, gender performance, roles, and script. Other times we have concepts, but not the words to realize them. Gender is the complex sense of how an individual relates to and identifies with one, multiple, or no gender categorizations. And there are a lot of gender categorizations. And that's what we'll mostly be talking about now, is what some of those more common ones are. But there are way more than we could ever discuss in this video. Some people think that there's one gender categorization for every person out there. And that if there are so many, if it's just an individual thing, why describe them at all? Those are incredibly interesting questions, but they are for another day. So we're going to present you with 3 individuals right here. This first one, this is an XX individual. So we remember before that if you're XX, you are female. So this XX individual says, "I feel like a woman," and this makes sense in our brains, right? XX female individuals are often women. But then look at this person. They're XY, and they also say, I feel like a woman too. And that doesn't quite match up in our brains because, XY is male, and male we often associate with men. And finally, we've got this person over here. They're XX, and they say they don't feel like a woman. They don't say that they feel like a man, but they don't feel like a woman. So it's not possible, just based on that, to say exactly what everybody's gender is in this picture. But what we can say is that this lady over here, and we'll call her a lady because she says she feels like a woman and she's got 2 X chromosomes, and hopefully that's okay with this stick figure. She's what's called cisgendered. What that means, so cis is a Latin prefix that means on the same side. We kind of line up, like I said before, female with woman and male with man. So the female part of her is on the same side as the woman in our chart. That makes her cisgendered. This person right here, that was a mistake. This person doesn't have any sort, I shouldn't have said he, because they say they feel like a woman, so I probably should have said she. And if this person feels like a woman and if they go around saying, I'm a woman, but they have an XY, that makes them something that instead is called transgender. One sec. Actually, I made a tiny mistake here. It's cisgender, not cisgendered, because actually I don't know why, but it's transgender, not transgendered. So it's, because it's an adjective, but anyhow, this person is transgender, and this person over here, we are not so sure, because they could also be transgender, they could be some other gender that we'll talk about in a minute, they could have no gender at all. But something that we do know is that this person is cisgender, and that both of these lovely folk over here are what is called gender queer. Basically, that just means they are not cisgendered. So what we'll talk about next is all sorts of different gender queer people. So the person in the middle over here, this woman, she is transgender. So there's a lot of different words for talking about people who are transgender. So the first two we just talked about, trans and cis. So trans meaning on the opposite side, cis meaning on the same side. So if somebody is female and they are a woman, or they're male and they're a man, they are cisgendered. But if they're female and they're a man, or they're male and they're a woman, then they're transgendered. So these next 4 ones, the MTF, FTM, MTM, and FTF, are just different ways of talking about that idea. So if somebody is MTF, what that means, if somebody is MTF, that means that they are a male to female transgendered person. This woman right here is a fantastic example of that. They have an X chromosome and a Y, meaning they're biologically male, but at the same time they are a woman. It's a little tricky because male to female sounds like they're changing their sex instead of their gender, but this is the word that existed when we started to think of this terminology, so that's what we still use today. So this is male to female. So you might be able to guess that this one here, if somebody's FTM, they're female to male transgendered person. But, like I just said, that language is not super great because this person wasn't male and now they're female. They're just male and also a woman. Or the second person here, they weren't female and now they're male. They're both female and a man. So that language isn't super great. So now people use what's called MTM and FTF, male to male or female to female. So if somebody like this person right here is born, he's a man, and he feels now as if, his outside and his inside don't quite match. He probably has like a vagina and a clitoris and a uterus, but those things he feels are incorrect. They're not right. And so he makes this transition. But it's wrong to say that he was a woman and now he's becoming a man. So instead, what this person might say is that they're a male-to-male transgender person, and that's what MTM stands for. This change is just supposed to show that what's changing is it's a better realization of who that person is, rather than it being a change in sex. It's not even a change in gender. It's a better expression to the rest of the world about what their gender always was. It's the same thing here with MTF. This person might consider themselves FTF instead. That way, it's just a better understanding of who they are, or a better presentation of who they are to the rest of the world, to the public. So all of these terms thus far have been for people who are born with one sex and they feel that they are the one gender that usually does not go with that. But what about people who are not like that? So the first three over here of these genderqueer folk have really easy prefixes that make it easy to figure out what they are. So first, A means a lack of something. So an atheist is somebody who does not believe in any sort of God. Something that's amorphous doesn't have any sort of shape. And somebody who's agender doesn't have a gender. They still have a sex. They could be male, they could be female, they could be intersex, but they don't consider themselves a man or a woman. They just consider themselves not, or perhaps just neutral on that. A bigender person, on the other hand, bi means two, right? Like a bicycle has two wheels. Bigender people are two genders. That's not the same thing, though, as being transgender, which is an easy mistake to make. Instead, these people are both they're both a man and a woman, or some other gender. They are two genders, either both at the same time, or they are two genders at different times of the day, week, month, or year. They don't fully identify with just one gender. Next, you have polygender. Poly means many, and somebody who's polygender will feel like many genders, all at the same time or at different times of the day, month, week, or year. So, for example, they may occasionally feel as if they are agender and then later fully male or fully woman. They may be both woman and a third gender, which we don't really go into all that much in this video, but there are other genders than the ones we're talking about here. And finally, are folk who are two-spirit. So this is something that is from indigenous cultures in the United States. I'm not sure if it's anywhere else, and because I don't know a ton about it, I'm just going to read straight off, because I certainly don't want to get somebody's gender wrong. In some indigenous cultures in the U.S., a person who identified with both male and female gender roles was called two-spirit, meaning that they have both the spirit of a man and one of a woman. Unlike many transgender people in the U.S. today, people who were two-spirit were typically viewed positively and seen as having a strength which their society benefited from. So there you go. If you are learning all of this for a class and it seems complicated and difficult, I can't emphasize enough that it is so worth your time. Gender is a fascinating thing to talk about, and the more you learn, the more interesting it is. So the one other thing I wanted to do is a good researcher always shows her sources, and super important. So none of what we talked about today would tell you who a person is interested in having relationships with. how many relationships they would want to be in, if any at all, or what those relationships look like. That's all a part of what's called sexuality, and that is a topic for another video. So hope you enjoyed this lesson and that you have a wonderful day.